Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the launch of the Nuclear Innovation Alliance's new report, Transforming the U.S. Department of Energy, Paving the Way to Commercialize Advanced Nuclear Energy, written by NIA's Judi Greenwald and Erik Cothron, and Matthew Wald, consultant to NIA. My name is Ben Finzel. I'm president of Renew PR in Washington, D.C., and I have the pleasure and the privilege of supporting NIA on communications. I'm also the moderator for today's conversation about this new report. I'm going to introduce NIA Executive Director Judi Greenwald in a moment, but first, I'd like to share a few notes about our agenda and today's conversation. After Judi provides an overview of the new report, NIA Innovation Analyst Erik Cothron will share highlights of the report, including the major recommendations and conclusions, and there are a lot. From there, I'm going to introduce DOE Assistant Secretary Dr. Kathryn Huff, followed by two senior congressional staff for leading members of the House and Senate. And finally, we'll host a response panel with an industry and technology policy expert, each of whom will share their thoughts on this report. Then I'll moderate an open Q&A before we wrap up by the top of the hour at noon Eastern today. You're welcome to start asking questions now by typing your question, your name, and your affiliation in the Q&A box, which is right there on your screen. Once we begin the Q&A session later this hour, I'll begin asking the questions of our guests to get our Q&A started. But first, let's begin with comments from NIA Executive Director Judi Greenwald. She's going to talk about NIA and this new report. Judi, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ben. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this briefing on the Nuclear Innovation Alliance's latest publication on transforming the U.S. Department of Energy. NIA is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think and do tank, working to create the conditions for success for advanced nuclear reactors as a climate and energy solution. Through research, analysis, and education, we inform federal and state decarbonization and innovation policy, legislation, advanced reactor licensing reform at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Department of Energy's nuclear innovation efforts, and the financial community. We collaborate with stakeholders to coordinate advanced reactor advocacy in the United States. We also organize the Nuclear Innovation Bootcamp for students and early career professionals. The NIA team created this report to provide recommendations on how the Department of Energy can be more effective in helping to commercialize advanced nuclear energy technologies. For the United States to address climate change and energy security, it has to harness advanced nuclear energy along with other clean energy technologies to produce abundant, reliable, and affordable carbon-free energy. Historically, DOE has primarily focused on research and development. More recently, emphasis is shifting toward technology deployment to meet climate and energy security challenges. In particular, DOE now has an additional task to incubate and position innovative advanced nuclear technologies for commercialization. To do so efficiently and effectively, DOE will have to transform itself to become more businesslike and focused on providing the tools and resources needed for an advanced nuclear energy industry that's looking to deploy new nuclear reactors and achieve full-scale market acceptance. Our hope is that the recommendations in this report will better position DOE as a catalyst for the public-private partnership needed to reach full-scale commercialization. I'd like to flag that the University of Michigan's Fastest Path to Zero initiative is releasing a report tomorrow that nicely complements NIA's paper. It's called Young Carla, a prequel to a step-by-step guide to nuclear innovation policy. It focuses on earlier stages of R&D than NIA's report and takes a look at how to create a larger number of novel advanced technological approaches. Our hope is that both of these papers initiate a new national conversation about how to get the most value from DOE. This is the moment to have this conversation. In legislation over the past couple of years, especially the Energy Act of 2020, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, Congress has provided substantial new direction and funding. Now it's time for DOE, Congress, and stakeholders to focus on effective implementation of these transformative policies through DOE transformation. Thanks again for joining us today, and back to you, Ben.
Judi, thank you so much, and congratulations on the release of this report. I know it was a lot of work, and I think we're seeing the great interest paying off in all the work that you did. Now I'm happy to introduce NIA Nuclear Innovation Analyst Erik Cothron. We're assuming that most of you have not had time to read the report yet, although it is online at nuclearinnovationalliance.org. So Erik is going to share a brief summary of the report and highlight some of the key recommendations and conclusions. Erik, take it away.
Thanks, Ben, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. I'm very excited to be here and to talk to you alongside this amazing panel we have lined up. As Judi mentioned, this report addresses how to create an effective interface between DOE and business to commercialize advanced nuclear energy. And for this interface to be successful, these two sides will need to work together seamlessly through extensive public-private partnerships to harness the resources and capabilities they both have. To help achieve this goal, this paper provides 17 different recommendations for DOE that are separated into 3 broad categories, each of which has its own chapter. Chapter 1, titled Developing an Advanced Nuclear Energy Strategic Plan, recommends the creation of a DOE-wide plan that integrates the capabilities of DOE's various offices and national labs to help coordinate efforts to commercialize advanced nuclear energy. This would involve the Office of Nuclear Energy spearheading an effort to better utilize the nuclear energy capabilities spread across the Office of Science, ARPA-E, the Office of Technology Transitions, the Loan Programs Office, and the national labs. Part of this effort would also include DOE establishing an advanced nuclear energy Earthshot, similar to the Earthshots DOE has established for hydrogen, storage, wind, and solar. This nuclear Earthshot would provide the framework for DOE's strategic plan, and it would help DOE to look at the entire supply chain. In this chapter, we also provide several other recommendations that would help with the successful implementation of DOE's advanced nuclear energy strategic plan. These include effectively implementing recent legislation and leveraging DOE's current and future advisory committees, and developing a comprehensive national strategy for exporting advanced nuclear energy technology. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, titled Becoming More Effective in Commercializing Advanced Nuclear Energy Technologies, focuses on improvements DOE can make in its own operations to assist in commercializing advanced nuclear. These improvements would require DOE to adapt to its new role as a critical partner for private companies, rather than focus solely on technological and scientific challenges. And it would also require DOE to adopt a more business-like approach in order to commercialize advanced nuclear energy more quickly. Several specific recommendations in this chapter include hiring more staff with business qualifications, using performance-based milestones and contracting procedures, helping nuclear startups by paying for their regulatory licensing fees, and assisting companies with their first-of-a-kind demonstrations all the way through full-scale deployment. And finally, chapter 3, which is titled Integrating Advanced Nuclear Energy Efforts Across the Federal Government, recognizes that while DOE has tremendous capabilities to assist in the commercialization of advanced nuclear energy, it will face various obstacles that will require help from other parts of government. Essentially, DOE cannot do it all alone. So to overcome these obstacles, we recommend that the White House appoint a senior director for civil nuclear energy in order to create the leadership structure that's needed for proper cooperation between other parts of government. These other parts of government include, but are not limited to, the Office of Management and Budget, the International Development Finance Corporation, and departments such as the Departments of State, Commerce, and Defense. Additionally, we recognize that Congress needs to provide DOE with targeted additional funding and flexibility, because not all of the recommendations made in Chapter 1 and 2 can be followed without this. And that brings us to the end of what's in the report. So to recap, Chapter 1 contains recommendations surrounding establishing an advanced nuclear energy strategic plan. Chapter 2 discusses how DOE can make improvements in its own operations to help assist in commercializing advanced nuclear energy. And Chapter 3 notes that DOE faces various obstacles that require help from all parts of government. So now that y'all are familiar with what's in the report, I'll pass it back over to Ben.
Thank you, Erik. And I should point out again that you can read the report for yourself by clicking on the link that we will add to the Q&A box, or going directly to the NIA website at nuclearinnovationalliance.org. Click on the resources tab. There's also 2 fact sheets there as well, which help to summarize what you just heard from Erik. So now I have the distinct pleasure of actually, as I said to Dr. Huff when we talked a week ago, we're not going to talk about you behind your back. We're going to talk about you right in front of you, with you in the room, which is wonderful and not something we always get to do. So I'm thrilled that we are joined by DOE Assistant Secretary, Dr. Kathryn Huff, And rather than read off her impressive credentials, because we don't have all day to do that, I'm just going to say that she is an accomplished leader, and we're very pleased that she took the time to read the report and also to be on the line with us here today and share some comments about it. So thank you, Dr. Huff. The floor is now yours.
Well, of course, and thank you. I really think it's helpful for us to receive as much input as we possibly can. This is a theme in terms of the way that this DOE and administration would like to lead is an inclusiveness around all voices. And I think the work that you all put into this report is really apparent in the nuance of some of the specific examples of what we could be doing to accelerate our transformation in DOE. And I think it really reflects a lot of understanding of where we are as DOE and where we should be and where we could be. While not all recommendations are implementable from just within this office, and I think that's a theme throughout the report, I think, of course, they all hold our equities directly at their center. So I'm very excited to sort of be able to comment on a few of those. In particular, I think at the core of all of these is the interactions that we have inside DOE with other offices and in the interagency. And those recommendations that you have really touch on a point that is critical to government functionality. And I just want to say, some of it I would really look forward to implementing with some of my colleagues. I think the notion that we could more formalize the way that NE works directly with LPO and OTT and OSED is definitely on the horizon. And I think you've laid out a nice map of how it could go. I would even add other offices to some of this. We have such an array of incredible capabilities within DOE. You guys have listed the core capabilities in ARPA-E and OSED and OTT and LPO that we definitely work with all the time and really should establish a formal sort of process for how we want to integrate. But I would even add that, we have the Office of Economic Diversity and Inclusion. So led by Shalonda Baker, we have an opportunity to work towards, DEI and energy justice in the context of all our programs by looping them in as sort of first-class citizens in our conversations. And then also I would say, I've been excited to work with our Clean Energy Jobs Office. It's currently, Bethany Jones helps to work within that space. And recently, of course, the Civil Nuclear Credit Program has moved into the Grid Deployment Office. So those are also natural places where we can incorporate some engagement inside any kind of formal framework for our interactions. But I will assure you, we do interact a lot with all those offices, and I think formalizing it is a cool idea. In addition to that, you talked a lot about coordination at the interagency and led from the White House. I will say I'm really lucky to have some incredible allies in the White House, great advocates for nuclear energy, and your suggestion of a senior director is a fantastic idea. It is the purview of our president to determine who works in his White House, and so I certainly won't comment on what should or shouldn't happen. But I will say I am already lucky to have some of the advocates that we do have in the White House. And I would name specifically folks in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, like Dr. Rian Baran, and a whole fleet of folks in the National Security Council and across our sort of broader space in the interagency. But in the Executive Office of the President, there's no question that they have some incredible leaders. And if more leaders like that could be included, I certainly wouldn't complain. That sounds like a fantastic idea, but I would defer to the president and his decisions on his office. Finally, I would say as a convening entity across the interagency, we do routinely work with state, commerce, NRC, OMB, the National Security Council, OSTP, and all of that alphabet soup can get a little muddled. And I think you do put your finger nicely on what it could look like to have a sort of nuclear energy directed space, if that kind of interagency coordination and devising and implementing a plan could be more comprehensive. It certainly wouldn't hurt. And I think we could play a role in that. So I think we'll look into all of these suggestions from the Office of Nuclear Energy as really actionable items. And I'm just so grateful to you at NIA and everyone who contributed to this report for including us. We really will take these recommendations seriously. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Huff, thank you again for being here, and not just because you said so many nice things. It really is helpful to hear directly from the folks who are really impacted by this. And to that point, there are a lot of actors involved in this conversation, and a lot of folks with a stake in the future of DOE, including Congress. So we're very happy to have two senior congressional staffers with us here today. to share perspective and insight from both sides of the Hill, the House and the Senate. We're going to start with Daniel Dziadon, professional staff member for the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Daniel's remarks will be followed by those of Rory Stanley, professional staff member for the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. Daniel, please get us started.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, NIA, for inviting me to speak today. My name is Daniel Dziadon. I've worked for the House Science Committee for the last 5.5 years on energy and environment issues. During that time, I've been in both the majority and minority and seen 3 different chairs of the full committee. But the one thing that's remained constant is bipartisan support for the development of advanced nuclear energy. So right now, much of the buzz is around the IIJA and the IRA, which are both bills with large increases in authorities and funding for advanced nuclear. But these efforts didn't happen overnight, and they certainly aren't the first attempt to address the topic. Rory, who will be speaking here shortly, is a familiar face and was a great counterpart working with me to enact the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act in 2017, or NECA, as we call it. That bill, it's now 5 years old, was one of the first steps in enabling the private sector to partner with national laboratories to demonstrate novel reactor concepts, among many other things. Couple years later, we worked on the Energy Act of 2020, which overhauled the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy. It modernized and refocused the department's many R&D programs and codified the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, which has gotten a lot of attention as well. And just this past year, we enacted the CHIPS and Science Act. Admittedly, advanced nuclear wasn't a major topic in that bill, but there were some provisions that boost the Office of Science fundamental research towards nuclear. And it had authorizing language I'm very proud of that looked to invigorate the nuclear infrastructure at research institutions and universities. So I give you that history because it's important. Reports like the one we're talking about today look towards the future and that Congress recognizes them. We've accomplished a lot, but there's always more to be done. And with that in mind, I'm going to try to highlight some of the specific recommendations of the report that I believe will be talked about and during this Congress and potentially the subject of some legislation. The first is the recommendation 1.1, which is the advanced nuclear energy Earthshot. I'm indifferent to the title of it or if it follows the Earthshot kind of program model, but I will say efforts to increase cross-office coordination at DOE is critical to the success of advanced reactors. The Office of Science, the Office of Technology Transitions, RPE, the national labs, all of those have had bipartisan support in the past and have had tremendous resources allocated to them that they can offer to advanced nuclear energy. So efforts to increase those office collaboration towards a central goal will be something we look to encourage. Recommendation 2.4, which is increasing and prioritizing what we call milestone-based awards. The model of DOE setting payments based on achievement of technical and economic milestones is something that has proved both cost and time efficient. It allows kind of an off-ramp for projects that might have merit but need more lab scale work. It also encourages the developments of projects that are ready to move forward into the demonstration and commercialization phase. So especially in the HALU space and advanced fuel space, I expect to see a lot of efforts to establish milestone-based programs and awards. Recommendation 2.7 is on the fast neutron test reactor. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, NECA in 2017, the department has been authorized and directed to establish the versatile test reactor, which they have moved forward with, and we're very appreciative of and happy to see. It's a critical part of ensuring that innovative materials and nuclear fuels R&D take place here in the United States. Congress is a place of give and take, and we've had our fair shares of issues getting the VTR fully appropriated at authorization levels and what's needed to meet its potential. But that's just part of it, and we look to continue that this Congress. And that leads to kind of the last recommendation, which is recommendation 3.2 and funding. We don't live in a perfect world where there are no constraints and we can spend as much money as we want and make everyone happy. Tough choices have to be made. So this Congress, it'll require that us as legislators and DOE as well take a hard look at a lot of the programs, the VTR included, and kind of decide if the current course is sustainable, if it meets timelines, or if not, if alternative approaches are needed. All of these are going to require buy-in and a hand-in-glove collaboration with the private sector, and we look forward to engaging with our many stakeholders. So again, I want to thank NIA for having me today and look forward to any questions.
Thanks, Daniel. Rory, over to you.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, NIA, for the invitation. It's really great honor to be able to speak quickly about the committee's priorities and my boss's priorities. I'm going to try to keep my remarks within the confines of what I think the report is most focused on and what I think the committee is going to be focused on, as well as touch on a little bit of what Chairman Manchin's priorities were in the previous Congress. And I think the main thing going into the Congress, especially seeing reactors retiring, was for Chairman Manchin was to ensure that additional nuclear power plants did not retire, and I think we really achieved that through both IRA and through the bipartisan bill with the Civil Nuclear Credit Program. Additionally, he wanted to fund advanced reactor technologies, research and development, and also fund the deployment of advanced reactors. And that was a critical inclusion in the bipartisan bill by funding ARDP Pathway 1. And in addition, assisting this energy transition that we're going to see in the next decade. And one of these key programs that in having conversations with local communities, state government, was the need to have financial and technical assistance in determining site feasibility for SMRs and advanced reactors. And so that became a priority for Chairman Manchin with the introduction of the Fission for the Future program, which gives further authorization to the Secretary of Energy to provide that assistance. And that was included in the CHIPS Plus bill. A little outside of the scope of this report, but I think as we understand, this is going to take integration of effort from many different agencies, is the inclusion of the ITC and PTC for advanced reactors. I think it's going to be very important because the amount of legislation that was passed in the past 18 months has so many new programs, and just in some of my initial conversations in the past 6 months, it's become very clear that not everybody in the private sector has a clear understanding, or in public as well, of what new programs are available, if they're applicable for the mission that they're trying, whether it be deploying a microreactor SMR or advanced reactor of some sort, and who they should be talking to. So I think some of the primary goals for myself and for Chairman Manchin is going to be communicating what has been enacted into law, making sure that we're making those proper connections between the staff at DOE and folks within communities and states that are interested in deploying advanced reactors, and also organizing, I think, events that bring together folks from state legislatures, governor's offices, commissions, and think tanks, federal agencies, to start engaging, explaining the benefits of these technologies, the affordability and the ability to really keep a tax base within communities, and frankly, how well these jobs pay. I think that's going to be, the economic factors are going to be a primary driver, and making sure that we're communicating those very well is going to be incredibly important. Some of the legislative priorities that I think align to a lot of what was highlighted in this report for this Congress include, and some of these are, or one of these are outside of ENR's jurisdiction, but we plan to work with EPW on. The first and foremost, I know, and is on everybody's mind, is nuclear fuel security. So that will need to be introduced. We worked last Congress to try to get it into the NDA and end of the year Omni, but fell a little short. So we'll just need to take that up again. In addition, and connected to that will be sanctions language and Russian suspension agreement. And also mentioned in the report, the International Nuclear Energy Act, to really create a unifying strategic function to bring all these efforts together to ensure that we have a good export strategy that is also connected to our advanced reactor development. Beyond that, looking at the back end of the cycle, I think getting some agreement on the Nuclear Waste Administration Act and hopefully moving that, I think is incredibly important. And then renewal of Price-Anderson. But yeah, beyond that, a lot of our schedule will be focused on oversight of implementation. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Rory, and thank you, Daniel. And wow, it's a good thing we have 2 years in this Congress. We're at the start of it, because that's a big list. That's a lot of work to do. Oh my goodness. That's an invaluable perspective from both of you. It's very important, though. It isn't just about the DOE and the Hill, as important as those two sectors are, but it's also the private sector and the NGO community as well. So we've got a quick response panel now representing those two communities. We're going to start with Scott Kopple, the Senior Director for Government Relations at BWXT Technologies. And then he'll be followed by David M. Hart, Professor at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University, and Senior Fellow at the Center for Clean Energy Innovation at the Information Technology Innovation Foundation, ITIF, which you can see behind David's head there. Scott is going to start, and then David's going to provide additional insight. So Scott, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Also, thank you to NIA for asking me to participate in today's forum. If you look closely at the report, you'll pick up on a theme of collaboration. Collaboration that is needed to help deploy advanced nuclear energy systems, which are critically needed if we are serious about tackling climate change, in my view. Having worked on Capitol Hill, at NNSA, at DOE, a national laboratory, and now for industry, I wanted to provide some perspective or color commentary in line with NIA's report. I've basically been on all sides of this equation. When you're working with the federal government, it is incumbent upon both parties to recognize that you are in partnership with one another. When it comes to advanced nuclear, both DOE and industry participating ultimately want the same end results. It so often comes down to people and their willingness and ability to communicate openly with one another, freely and quickly, when it comes to defining scope, working out contract details, setting expectations, and coming together on performance metrics. While parties might have different perspectives on what is driving their interests, it is important to recognize that DOE professionals and industry partners are doing what they think is best, whether it's looking out for the taxpayer, shareholders, other customers, or communities of interest. Motives for action and certain outcomes might be slightly different to everyone, but nonetheless, they're all valid. We so often focus on the differences when there really is a lot of common interests. When it comes to differences, not every contract is the same. There is no one size fits all when you start to dive in. They might look similar on the outside, but the dynamics usually differ. While BWXT is clearly in the nuclear business, we have a diverse set of partnerships inside and outside of government with different deliverables and structures to achieve success. With that in mind, I'd like to point to a couple of the recommendations in the report that I think are particularly notable. The concept of appointing a senior director for civil nuclear energy at the White House is a good one. Clean energy and nuclear solutions have become much more politically viable and acceptable in recent years, and that is a very good thing. However, there are so many competing priorities at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Tackling climate change is bigger than just DOE. Having someone at the interagency level to coordinate and adjudicate activities across the government would be extremely useful. In previous administrations, there have been effective staff in the White House staffing apparatus. We had some very good people who just happen to be very good at bringing people together and forcing some level of action in senior level decisions when it's beyond or above just DOE. Having someone in a position, as NIA suggests, would be tremendous for everyone. The second issue I wanted to flag from the report is the recommendation to have DOE hire more business professionals. While I don't disagree with the rationale, absent additional funding, I think this one will require a lot of focus than one might initially think. It seems that since COVID started, recruitment for talent has been challenging across many industries in the US. Unless DOE has sustained long-term funding streams to support these types of career hires, this will be very challenging. Sustainment is a key here. Hiring people is not a one-time sunk cost. These are real people who you need to be offered a career path to with good benefits if you want to retain them over the long haul. I do think that it would be helpful to DOE to at least explore authorities that they may already have or may need to have to provide competitive salaries at a rate that is more competitive with the private sector for similar talents and jobs. If we can do this for science and tech, why not for more traditional business acumen focused positions? Finally, we should not lose sight of the market itself and what it's willing to bear in terms of risk, timelines, and overall costs. The more that we can work together in a partnership fashion, the better chances we have for success. When I think of the advanced nuclear supply chain, the more we can rely on existing capabilities and those companies who have a specific niche in one area or another of that supply chain, combined with the best practices and continuous improvement, including many of the recommendations laid out by NIA, our chances for success for nuclear deployments is certain to rise. Thank you, and I look forward to the Q&A. So back to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Scott. David, take it away.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks to Judi and the NIA team for including me in this webinar. I'm perhaps less sure than others here what the role of nuclear power will be in a net zero world. It's a promising technology and unique in many respects, and so it's got to be in the portfolio. But I think the community needs to be very self-aware that its success is far from guaranteed. It faces a lot of challenges, environmental challenges, technical challenges, geopolitical challenges, and it also faces serious competition. So I think nuclear still has a lot to prove. But if it's going to succeed, it has to be different. And that's what's exciting about what NIA is doing and what many of the speakers here have emphasized. It's got to be different than it's been in the past technologically, and especially in terms of its approach to industry. So I really endorse the report's emphasis on cost and on improved coordination within DOE and across the government. And I'm particularly enthused about the idea of an integrated strategy that focuses on end uses. So approaching nuclear power as a business challenge in the context of an integrated strategy, rather than just as an R&D or science and tech challenge, is long overdue. Our policy has usually focused on supply, that is the supply of technology, and not on demand. But the global energy system has changed, and it's going to keep changing. It's changing towards flexibility, towards interactivity, and nuclear is going to need to meet that challenge if it's going to have a big place in this low carbon world. So I think it's crucial that this strategy be advocated by NIA and considered by the administration and other folks in a position to bring it into life. At the same time, this business model is still going to have to take the safety requirements, including waste disposal, very seriously. And nuclear has a higher burden to deal with in this regard than the other technologies that might play similar roles in a low carbon system. So whether it's providing firm power or industrial heat, I think nuclear has a higher threshold to surmount. I also wonder about whether innovative nuclear will have a larger market outside the US than inside. There's a formidable competition in the US for renewables, from natural gas with carbon capture, I think, that may be different abroad. So the competitive picture may be different in different countries. And if that's right, it does raise the question of whether an industry, whether a country without a strong domestic market can really be successful in the export market. And it's certainly going to require working with allies and potential customers overseas, and obviously the kind of coordination across the interagency that a number of other speakers have referred to, and that are focused on in recommendation 1.6 of the report. And this is also going to extend into the supply chain. And we've seen some interesting dynamics around the electric vehicle supply chain since the IRA passed. And I think the question of how the US collaborates with its partners in low carbon supply chains, I think is a big one, and it's going to face nuclear as well. And all of these concerns have been reinforced by the geopolitical turmoil that Russia had unleashed in the last year. I think the conversation has really changed in some ways, I think, to the benefit of the nuclear industry because of the focus on security as well as innovation in carbon reduction, but obviously also complicated by the challenges of managing a different kind of supply chain in the past. So let me just close by congratulating NIA on the report and for moving this important debate forward. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Scott, for that perspective. And I have to say, I do a lot of these events, and to see a set of insights this broad and this diverse and this complete is really remarkable. So it's wonderful to hear everyone's perspective on this and really pull together some thoughts about what, frankly, is a challenging topic. I mean, if this were easy, we would have done it already, right? It's not. So I think it's great. We've got a good head start here. We have some questions in the Q&A box. As a reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I'll do my best to get to them. I'm going to start with one from Jessica Songeroth from Energy Intelligence, and it's for Dr. Huff. Do you have an update on the timing for the HALEU RFP? And that is high assay low enriched uranium, for those of you who don't know. So update on the timing of this RFP.
Yeah, it's making its way through concurrence through that very interagency that we have just discussed. And so very soon it should be out in the public, but it should be weeks, not months.
Great, thank you. Another question from Jessica Songeroth from Energy Intelligence. This is for Rory, but I would imagine, Daniel, if you want to answer it as well, you can. On the effort to secure additional funding for HALEU and LEU procurement and potential sanctions on Rosatom, how does this look under the new Congress? What are the challenges?
I think the challenges are going to be somewhat similar to the last Congress. I mean, this is a problem that's going to require bipartisan alignment. And I think we're very close to that, as we demonstrated by getting authorization language attached to the NDA, and very close to agreement on the Omni. I think we're just going to have to keep working that and keep getting outside stakeholders, doing outreach to the relevant stakeholders in this. On the funding side, that is going to be a little trickier, just because the original effort was to get essentially the entire program forward funded through the Ukraine supplemental. We fell a little short there as well, but I think we're still in a pretty good spot just with the amount of funding that we had in IRA with the 700 million and then just regular appropriations. And we've been working with our counterparts on the House side on the Russian suspension agreement and sanctions and waiver language as well. Language has been shared with House Ways and Means, so we're just going to have to keep pushing.
Thank you, Rory. Daniel, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, I agree with Rory, kind of the same challenges. I won't talk about the sanctions because that's not really House Sciences jurisdiction, but when it comes to procurement, I think it's just finding that mutual ground. And I think seeing, announcements like the ARDP program facing setbacks because of HALEU supply kind of cranks up the pressure on us to reach that agreement. But I agree with Rory. I think we're very, very close. It's kind of just all in the tiny details that we can look at this Congress.
Thank you. Anyone else, Judi or Erik, you want to weigh in on that before I move on? Okay, so more questions coming in, and I'm doing my best to sort through them here. I will just mention some of the comments in the Q&A are comments and not questions, so I'm going to skip over those and focus first on the questions, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. This is from Colin Megson, and I will point out, in addition to a large number of reporters on the call, we also have a very big audience of stakeholders from across the country, so some of the questions are from some of those folks. This is from Colin Megson. U.S. Representative Chuck Fleischmann is on record as believing SMRs are the future of nuclear power in the U.S. and maybe worldwide. Also, 400 sites of, quote, coal to SMR transitions have been identified. Does this mean big nuclear, even advanced, is finished? That's quite a question. Anyone want to address that?
No, big nuclear isn't finished. We just secured Westinghouse just secured a deal for multiple AP1000s to be built in Poland. We're going to see that continue to be the case. This year, we'll see the 2 Vogtle units turning on and coming online and entering our grid. I think there's, our climate crisis requires terawatts of energy transformation. And so there will be plenty of room for gigawatts of advanced generation 3+ nuclear reactors. And in fact, many of those coal sites, I would say, are possibly appropriate even for gigawatt scale reactors, while most of them certainly are, especially appropriate for the kind of capacity sizes that you would see from SMRs. There's no question that a lot of them could be excellent sites for gigawatt scale plants if there's appetite in the commercial industry and on those grids, not just in the United States, but abroad. I do see a more significant market abroad right this second on gigawatt scale nuclear power than I do in the United States, but I don't know that can't change.
Thank you, Dr. Huff. Anyone else before we move on?
Yeah, I'll just add that I think advanced nuclear energy, what's exciting about it, it has a diversity of sizes. And I do think there are a lot of uses where a smaller, at least smaller than historically, traditionally gigawatt size plants might be more appropriate. And possibly this is an example of what David talked about, where there might be differences in different countries. I think maybe the smaller ones are more likely to be successful here in terms of our pace of needing additions and the kinds of plants that you want to compete with. For example, you can have an advanced nuclear plant of a small modular reactor size that can compete on the same size as a natural gas plant. So having a diversity of sizes is what's very exciting about advanced nuclear energy, including down to microreactors. There may be remote applications where microreactors would be exactly what's called for. There's certainly growing interest, for example, in Alaska, in microreactors for remote applications. So it's the diversity of sizes to sort of make these, to have nuclear plants that are fit for purpose. And in the industrial sector as well, maybe the smaller ones. So I really do think what's exciting is that we're now seeing that advanced nuclear energy could come in all sizes.
Thank you, Judi. I'm going to move on. The questions are flying in here. This one might be a good bridge to some of the other ones. So I'm going to go to this one next. It's from Nico Portuando from E&E News. Is there any momentum on the legislative front to deal with the regulatory burdens on nuclear, making it less economic to build new/run existing plants? Another big question.
I guess I can start with that. This is obviously a bit out of our jurisdiction, but I can say, yes, we're having discussions on, what type of activities can help encourage potential acceleration of licensing. And I've had conversations with folks that are working on projects like Project Pele, and some of the activities that they've undertaken to help really between DOE and DoD, making sure that everybody's in the room when they're having conversations about the technology to help accelerate that process. So I think there are things that can be done just outside of legislative action and increase funding and providing grants to private companies. That's going to be part of the equation and something that we've focused on last Congress through regular appropriations. But I think there are just also some simple things to make sure that this is a quick transition or through the licensing process.
Thank you. Daniel, do you want to add anything before I move on?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, agreeing with Rory here. Of course, there's momentum that's always kind of in the back of our mind. It's in developing advanced nuclear, if it's going to die on the vine when you put it out in the commercial phase, what's the point of all of it? So kind of how we increase these partnerships, getting NRC and DOE working together early in the R&D process is crucial. There's very small things in terms of just getting people around the same table and talking about the same thing. So I do see a lot of momentum moving forward into this Congress, and we'll see, kind of how that manifests itself.
Thank you.
I'll just add that, this is primarily regulating the safety of nuclear plants. So the sort of the regulatory burden that people talk about is mostly about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and our focus here today is on DOE. But NIA does a lot of work in this space, and stay tuned, we'll be doing more work. We agree with Rory that there is a potential for a Nuclear Regulatory Commission reform, a lot of things that NRC could do on its own, as well as things that it could do with better funding or more appropriations, as well as potentially legislative reform. I should mention or emphasize that one of our recommendations is that DOE effectively implement a program that was authorized a few years ago that recently just got some appropriations in the omnibus. And that's a program where companies can apply to the Department of Energy to have some of their Nuclear Regulatory Commission licensing fees covered. And we think this is an important program. We're excited that it's getting started with some funding, and think that this could really be helpful for those early movers who are bravely entering the NRC licensing process, and they're first movers, not only technologically and in terms of their business model, but also in doing regulatory innovation in partnership with NRC. And we think it's important to support that.
Thank you, Judi. A few more questions on HALEU, so I'm going to try to bunch them together. One from John Funk of RTO Insider. HALEU currently manufactured by Centra through a contract awarded without competition. Any plans to foster competition for HALEU production?
Yeah, this one's easy. So I'm glad you asked this question because it gives an opportunity for us to highlight a little bit of a misconception. So the first phase of the Piketon demo that Centrus is currently operating was for construction, and that in the previous administration was not competed. However, in this administration, the operational phase of that contract was recompeted, and Centrus did face competition, did win that contract through this competitive process, and is now in the process of operating that facility. So it is no longer true to say that Centrus is operating in an uncompeted contract with DOE. But I will add that, of course, the HALEU RFP, which I said would come in weeks, not months, will be fully competitive. And I have promised Congress that that will be the theme throughout this administration, that we will be competing dollars rather than awarding sole source contracts. So I've said so in testimony under oath, and I will continue to act this way.
Thank you, Dr. Huff. Anyone else? We have another HALEU question. Looking around the room, I don't see. Okay, so this is from Rahul Rao. He writes for IEEE Spectrum and other publications. He says, thanks for discussing the report. With regards to HALEU procurement, you discuss cultivating a domestic market, but considering that Rosatom 10X is the only present source of HALEU, is that something you see as a potential for export? Similar kind of question there.
Yeah, this gets to our need for, making sure that we have an expanded capability in the United States for conversion and enrichment. And we're going to keep pushing on DOE's uranium strategy, and we're really grateful for the work we've done with Congress. What was I guess I missed kind of the real question part of this though.
Domestic, potential for export.
Oh, yes, hopefully someday we do have enough capacity to support that notion. Right, yeah, I guess I did answer it. There you go. Hopefully someday.
Yeah, I mean, as with the advanced reactors, we have the greatest chance of being successful if we both have domestic capability as well as international. We want to reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions. We want to take care of our own energy security, but we also want to help the world with their energy security and decarbonization challenges. And we also have potentially a competitive advantage in this space. So for many, many reasons, we need to work on the entire supply chain, be successful here and abroad. And certainly it would be good from our perspective if not just the United States can be independent of the Russian 10X company for HALEU, but if other countries could be as well. So certainly I think that our ambitions are ultimately to have a better and more robust nuclear capacity and supply chain for our allies as well as ourselves.
Thank you, Judi. And a question about Vodal, actually two questions about Vodal from Rod Adams, the publisher of Atomic Insights. First question, are there any efforts underway in the US to take full and timely advantage of the learning that occurred during the Vodal 3 and 4 project? And then the second question is, if one of the major lessons from Vodal was the fundamental importance of starting with a complete design, wouldn't it be a good idea to move forward with AP1000s in the US? The detailed design is complete. Thoughts? I see some smiles.
I'll start and maybe other people want to weigh in. So, I mean, it's certainly easier to do things the second time than the third time than the first time. But once again, it has to be fit for purpose. So if there are additional customers for additional AP1000s, that would be great. And I'm actually very excited. I'm actually going to see Vogel next week. I'm going to get to see it after it's been complete and before it turns on, which is very exciting and sort of a unique opportunity. And I do think we've learned a lot, and we could take those lessons forward for other AP1000s as well as other projects, nuclear projects more broadly. And it can also help with the supply chain. There's a lot of interrelationships with the success of various projects within the portfolio, but certainly it's up to the potential customers to decide which technologies they want to pick and what their size is and how they work for them.
Thank you. Anyone else before I move on? So we still have lots more questions. Okay, this is from Ken Serwinski from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. The DOE supports the education and training of the nuclear workforce at a number of levels. Within the report, is there a call for additional workforce for the DOE to assist with commercialization? The issues associated with the workforce for building and operating reactors has been touched upon by some speakers. Does NIA have any input regarding the future workforce needed to implement advanced nuclear technology in the United States? This can include actions to be taken by the DOE, private sector, and universities.
Yeah, maybe I can start with that. So we do have a section that's totally dedicated to, us thinking that DOE should focus on, hiring people with business acumen, just to, give that business experience so they can help commercialize advanced nuclear reactors. There's also this point there that, a lot of, smart and up and coming people that are going through universities right now consider, climate change and energy security to be one of the greatest challenges of our time. So the good news is there's no lack of, inspiration and people looking to sort of like climb the ladder and tackle these problems. So I think it leaves me with a lot of hope, and hopefully, we can capitalize off of, that incoming talent because we need to.
I can jump in here, Ben. From an industry perspective, we are constantly on the lookout I'll call it for, it's an ongoing search for talent. And that's both, we talked about earlier, sort of this business side, but also in the trades area. So a lot of us, BWXT, but also a lot of our, friends in industry, we often collaborate with maybe our local trade schools, community colleges, technical schools. There's that constant, need to fill those pipelines if we're going to be successful, especially we're talking, something is, I'll call industrial heavy in many ways, whether it's an SMR or maybe not in BWXT's case, but, large nuclear, we talked about earlier in terms of the current generation and the current fleet. So it's a continuum, and it's certainly on our minds. And so those communities where we exist, and I know, again, a lot of our industry partners have similar programs set up where they reside for that pipeline. And sometimes also it's finding talented people who are willing to be involved, and then we can teach them, we can train them, we can bring them up to speed. So again, it's a constant, issue that, we'll continue to push. And again, I think I speak for pretty much industry, certainly in the manufacturing side, that is the challenge is not lost on us, and we need to get there. So.
Thank you, Scott. Anyone else before I move on?
Yeah, I'll just mention that, it's so exciting what's happening with the amazing amount of policy that's just been enacted in the past few years, the growing interest in the private sector. And there's just a lot of exciting stuff happening in the advanced nuclear space. And the training of people who can do this work can lag the investment. So we really do need to accelerate our efforts on getting a pipeline of people who are interested in working in this space. We work on this in a very tiny way through our Nuclear Innovation Bootcamp. DOE is doing a lot to foster education and university programs that do a lot of the training that trains the next generation of nuclear engineers and scientists. We also have our national labs resources. So there's a lot happening, but we do need to accelerate this so that we have the people coming in to do the work, both in the public and the private sector, and also in the civil society. So it's a need. We got to get on the case, but it's a really exciting problem to have, actually.
Thank you, Judi. And I'll just point out, if you want to know more about the Nuclear Innovation Bootcamp, go to the NIA website and search for that. It will be held in Japan this summer, which is fairly exciting, I think. So very cool, and happy to answer more questions about that offline. We have time for, I think, one more question, and I'm just going to go back to one of the first ones that was asked by Joe Turnage, retired from Constellation Energy. Can DOE's culture adapt to risk taxpayer money for high-risk, low TRL projects with high potential payoff, the key to disruptive innovation? So a question about DOE's culture.
Yeah, I think this is actually a great question, and I think it really gets to the heart of our realignment recently that has made sure that there is a new office for infrastructure that separates itself from the Office of Science and Innovation. So I say office, but the whole undersecretariat above me is the Office of Science and Innovation. It includes the Office of Science, it includes fossil energy, it includes renewable energy, and myself. And that now there's also an infrastructure office that can capture some of those high TRL activities so that we can maintain some real strength as an R&D shop, basically, in the low TRL high risk space. And I will additionally point out the particular mandate that ARPA-E has in this space. And they've done a great job really expanding what they can do for nuclear in the last couple of years. And ARPA-E's whole mandate is to do those low TRL, high risk, high reward kind of projects at the R&D level. And I think we're working together well in a nice new organization that is intended to kind of separate attention on these different TRL levels at a certain level. So it's happening.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Huff.
I'll just add, I agree with Dr. Huff. I was going to mention RPE myself. I don't think the question is, can DOE's culture adapt? Because RPE is doing it right now. They are high risk, high reward. It's whether others are willing to embrace RPE's high risk, high reward culture and kind of have that integration. So exactly what Dr. Huff said, RPE is doing it right now. We look forward to kind of spreading that culture.
Great. Judi, do you want the last word before we wrap up?
No, I think Danielle and Katie said it well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Remarkably, the hour that we set aside for this event has flown by. To think I thought we wouldn't get enough questions. Sadly, we didn't answer all of them. We will do our best to follow up with you to address those ones that we missed. I want to just remind you that you can download the report and fact sheets about it from nuclearinnovationalliance.org. And we encourage you to follow the NIA on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well. Keep up on all the latest NIA news, including more reports like this one. But that is it for now. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you to our fantastic, amazing panel of special guests, Dr. Huff, Daniel Dziadon, Rory, Stanley, Scott Kopple, and Professor David Hart. Thank you all very much. Have a great day, and we appreciate you joining us.